Morning, everybody. The peace of Christ be with you this morning. Thank you. Just in case we haven't met, I'm Josh, and it is a gift to be together this morning. This summer, we are in a series called Summer Slowdown, where we as a community are considering how we might deliberately and intentionally create space to slow down and engage with God, engage with our humanity, engage with the creation around us and these lives that we have been given. We began 2 weeks ago with Rachel's sermon on the first step to slowing down, which is to stop. She talked about how the word in the Bible for Sabbath, Shabbat, that's the day that we think of as the day that we're not supposed to work. That word, Shabbat, literally means to cease, to completely stop. And Rachel talked about how when God commands the Israelites to observe this Sabbath day, to keep it holy in the book of Deuteronomy, the reasoning for it is because you were slaves in Egypt and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. I wonder if you caught that. I just want to make sure you did. The logic for ceasing from work for one day is you used to be slaves. Slaves can't rest from their work. They can't cease. Only the liberated can do that. Or, put another way that I think might challenge some of us here, if you cannot cease from your work for a day, you might just be enslaved to it. That's challenging stuff, huh? And then last week, Dave brought us into the idea of rest. Not just physical rest, but spiritual rest, which looks like tapping into the internal space of shalom, of peace, that is based in a relationship with Christ. And that when we do this, it allows anxiety and fear to be replaced by trust and peace. If you haven't had a chance to go and listen to that sermon, I encourage you to do so. Because over these next few weeks, we're going to be taking these two postures, stopping and resting, and we're going to work out what engaging in them allows us to do in our spiritual lives. Or put another way, what fruit might stopping and resting produce in our lives? And today, we're talking about a topic that is very serious to me. It's one of the things that I genuinely think God made me to be an evangelist of, which is play. Play. I love play. I really do. I grew up with 4 younger brothers, and play was just like, my whole childhood was all about play, probably to a fault, but that's okay. I really believe that play is not just a possibility for Christians, not even just a practice that we can do, but that it is actually a responsibility of our faith. That we cannot rightly engage in our rest or our work, our lives themselves, unless we play. And if you're here and you would not consider yourself a Christian, I want to invite you to consider over the course of this morning, is there anything compelling to you about the vision of a playful kingdom that we talk about today? In his book, The God Who Plays, author Brian Edgar framed the responsibility to play this way. He said, "In the life of the redeemed, play is an element of both work and rest. It is important to work because without it, work is drudgery, and it's important to rest because without it, rest is simply passivity. Play makes work and rest the delight they ought to be." I won't do a show of hands, but I think probably most of us in this room have experienced the sort of work that is drudgery and a rest that feels either wasteful or passive. Usually that kind involves screens of some kind. And I wonder, could play be the missing ingredient? And by wonder, I mean it is. It's the missing ingredient. There is a whole lot of research that goes into supporting this claim as well. As far back as the 1700s, some of you might be familiar with the work of Friedrich Schiller, who's a German philosopher who developed what was called the play drive theory, where he theorized that without play, life is either too rational or too sensual, but that play brings a balance to life and to the two of those things. And today, there are organizations like the National Institute for Play, which is based in Carmel, and I'm really hoping they want like a chaplain of some kind. That would be so cool, the play chaplain. They've found in their interdisciplinary research that play is, quote, a fundamental biological, psychological, and social mechanism shaping how we learn, adapt, connect, and thrive across a lifespan. According to one article, play relieves stress, fuels creativity, imagination, and problem-solving abilities, and facilitates happiness and well-being. Play is also a gateway to empathy, communication, and relationships. And I want to emphasize, this is research done with adults, not children. So it is good for us to play. But beyond that, play is a present participation in the goodness of creation and an anticipation in the playful life of the future kingdom of God. That's Brian Edgar again. That's what I want us to consider this morning. How play is an act of deliberate rebellion against the empires of the world and an allegiance to the childlike kingdom of Christ. Do you see that I take play seriously? I workshopped that sentence for a long time. I have a special invitation for you this morning. It only happens one time. If, while you're listening, you want to play a game of tic-tac-toe with the person next to you in your seat, you have my full permission to do so, and at some point in the sermon, I'll check in to see who won. So please engage in that if you'd like to. Our passage this morning opens with Jesus responding to a very adult-like question from his disciples. They ask, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Now, the nature of this question suggests that it was inspired maybe by something they had just seen or experienced. One possibility is just before this, very recently, is the moment where Jesus goes through a transfiguration. He goes up onto this mountain with a few of his disciples. He's transformed, and then he meets with Moses and Elijah there, and some of the disciples see it. So it's possible that they have that in their mind, and they're like, whoa, there's some great things ahead for us here. But no matter what brings this question up, their purpose for asking it is pretty obvious, I think. They want a place of honor and recognition and esteem in Jesus' kingdom. It's a question that makes sense in an honor-based culture like the one they lived in. And it's also a question that makes sense in the mindset of empire, where the primary aim is ascendancy. It's a serious question. It's a grown-up question. And in response, Jesus calls over a little child, puts them in the middle of the room and says, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Little children? Children in this day and age, in the ancient world, they were not unvalued. We see a lot of stories through the Gospels where people come to Jesus asking him to heal their children. So clearly, children were cherished by their families, but they were powerless and without any status in the ancient world. Until they were of a working and marrying age, children in Jesus' day had no political, financial, or societal power or influence. One commentator says, to be like a child is not a personal characteristic, but a social location of powerlessness. And yet, when asked about greatness, this is who Jesus highlights. Who's the greatest in my kingdom, says Jesus? First, who says you're in already? That's the assumption they're making, right? We know we're going to be in, but who ranks higher? Jesus says, really? You're going to be in? The kingdom is for children, and only grown-ups ask questions like that. This is the nature of Christ's kingdom. It is one with no room for adultishness. What could he mean that to be in the kingdom, we must be like little children? Doesn't Paul talk about how when we were kids, we used to act like kids, but that we needed to grow up in our faith? In her book, Unfettered, which if I could recommend one resource to you from all of this studying, it would be this book. It is so good. Theologian Mandy Smith clarifies the kind of childlikeness that Jesus was talking about with two characteristics of childlikeness. She says it this way. First is that children identify and engage as whole selves. Thinking, feeling, sensing, embodied, relational, they are whole selves. How often, in the middle of a moment of fear, do children say, well, this is just my psychological side reacting right now. Like, I know I shouldn't rationally be afraid. No, right? When children are afraid, they say, my tummy hurts, I want my mom. So too in their play, right? They swim and they run and they climb and they jump and they make believe until every drop is used up. They don't compartmentalize, they are all in. And the second is that children know how to engage without taking full responsibility. So while they're all in, they don't believe that everything depends on their being all in. They play and play and play, and then they say, Dad, I'm hungry. They'll tell a fanciful story and refuse to answer logical, clarifying questions. This is what it looks like to be childlike instead of childish, right? It looks like John Mosby wearing a frog hat while singing in the choir up here. Some of you might remember that. It looks like every Tuesday morning I go out surfing and there's this group of women in their 70s boogie boarding early Tuesday mornings, and they are just like so full of joy. That's childlikeness. Mandy Smith goes on to demonstrate how these characteristics also describe Christ. He's a fully integrated person who does not act as if all depends on him, but on, instead, his Father. She says this, Jesus reveals to us the beauty of a life lived, knowing how we fit into the broader whole. In harmony with the Father and with one another, he feels no need to selfishly withdraw in childish ways or to force himself on others in adultish ways. He can hover in a space of needing and being needed, of serving and being served, of knowing and living within his limitations. He doesn't even feverishly work at making himself more childlike. He is a human at peace, a true self. Quick check-in. Has anybody won a game of tic-tac-toe? Anybody? You guys are failing at playing right now. Okay, you're tied. Good. Okay, keep at it, keep at it. Do we have any Chronicles of Narnia fans in here? Show of hands. Yeah, we got some Narnia fans. I was reminded this week of a moment in the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis that paints a picture of this Christ, this childlike Christ. In the story, after his resurrection, Aslan the lion, who represents Jesus, reveals himself first to Susan and Lucy, these two sisters. And rather than rush off to prepare Narnia for this war that is coming with this witch, it says this. He comes to them and he says, "O children," said the lion, "I feel my strength coming back to me. O children, catch me if you can." He stood for a second, his eyes very bright, his limbs quivering, lashing himself with his tail, and then he made a leap high over their heads and landed on the other side of the table. Laughing, though she didn't know why, Lucy scrambled over to reach him. Aslan leaped again. A mad chase began. Round and round the hilltop he led them, now hopelessly out of their reach, now letting them almost catch his tail, now diving between them, now tossing them in the air with his huge and beautifully velveted paws and catching them again, now stopping unexpectedly so that all three of them rolled over together in a happy, laughing heap of fur and arms and legs. It was such a romp as no one had ever... my thing's all messed up. It was such a romp as no one had ever except in Narnia. Probably seen except in Narnia. And whether it was more like playing with a thunderstorm or playing with a kitten, Lucy could never make up her mind. And the funny thing was that when all three finally lay together, panting in the sun, the girls no longer felt in the least tired or hungry or thirsty. This is the childlike Christ who we follow. A living thunderstorm and a kitten all in one. One who is fully dependent on his Father, a true self. Contrast this with the way of living and the demands of empire that we are familiar with in our daily lives. Empire doesn't want you to be childish so much as adultish, right? Empire says that you are what you accomplish, what you build. You must protect yourself at all costs. Don't be vulnerable. Only the strong make it to the top. Push down the weak around you if it helps you to get ahead. Don't fall behind. Be better. Earn more. Do more. Maximize growth. Optimize everything. Grow up. Be serious. Adultishness is childishness that dresses up in grown-up clothes, Mandy Smith says. It'll tell us that to be taken seriously is our highest goal. But the kingdom of Christ frees us from the demands of empire. It frees us to be vulnerable, to be dependent on our Father, to not have it all together, to be gentle and humble, to serve, to embrace our limitations, and to cease and rest, because it is a kingdom where our importance is not based on how seriously we may be taken, on how much we may be honored in this lifetime even, but by how at peace we may be in our reliance on God. And so it frees us to play. Play is a present participation in the goodness of creation. It is being a creature. I have a quick critique of like a bunch of commentators that I read this week. They often talked about how play is a very human thing. And I don't think that's true. If you've been in the earth is such a playful place. It is teeming with play. Just ask our cat that wakes us up at 6 a.m. every morning to play. It is a playful place, this world is. Thomas Merton, a contemplative theologian who they are not exactly known for their playfulness, he said this about the upside-down kingdom and what it means for us. What is serious to men is often very trivial in the sight of God. What in God might appear to us as play is perhaps what he himself takes most seriously. At any rate, the Lord plays and diverts himself in the garden of his creation, and if we could let go of our own obsession with what we think is the meaning of it all, we might be able to hear his call and follow him in his mysterious cosmic dance. We are invited to forget ourselves on purpose, to cast our awful solemnity to the wind, and join in the general dance. Or, put most succinctly by C.S. Lewis, when I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. See, Christ's kingdom is for those who play because it is childlike. And it is childlike because it is Christ-like. Play is a present participation in the goodness of creation and an anticipation of the playful life of the future kingdom. So playing is anticipatory kingdom living. It is looking forward to what this world will be like one day. Now, the very fair and understandable pushback to all of this play talk might be that the world we live in is not a very playful place. The earth may be, but certainly not this world. And that it may be naive or irresponsible or even harmful to play or maintain a playful spirit when the world is as it is. Maybe you are like in the battle zone that is parenthood, and you're like, if I have to do another day of play or dress up, I will lose my marbles. Maybe you feel like your life is in far too dark of a place to even consider being playful right now. Please hear that if that is you, God absolutely takes your life and your pain seriously. He is not playing with your life. And while God takes our pain and the pain of this world very seriously, he also maintains a broad view of the reality of what he has promised to do and is doing, namely, bringing a kingdom where all things are made new. The story of the Bible is the story of a relationship between creator and creation, one where no matter what happens, creator refuses to give up on creation and ultimately brings it back to himself. The prophet Zechariah, writing to a remnant of Jewish people returning home after exile, talks about this day and what this will all look like. And he writes this: "This is what the Lord says, I will return to Zion again. Once again, men and women of ripe old age will sit in the streets of Jerusalem. The city streets will be filled with boys and girls playing there. It may seem marvelous to the remnant of this people at that time, but will it seem marvelous to me? I will save my people from the countries of the east and the west. I will bring them back to live in Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be faithful and righteous to them as their God." This is written to this remnant of people not because their present reality looked like this. They had lost so much of their culture, of their way of life, their worship practices, even family and friends had died in this time. This was written to them so that they might live in the present according to what God would do. This is living faith. Living in faith means living in the present as if a future reality exists right now. That's why play is anticipatory kingdom living. Because in God's one-day kingdom, there will be streets filled with people playing. And so now we can be a playing people, no matter our circumstances. It's a way of saying, God, I believe you. I believe you that it's not all my responsibility. I believe you that you will make it yours and that you will come through. And in so doing, it's a rebellion against the empires of this world. It's an allegiance to the Christ-like kingdom that Jesus is bringing. Frederick Buechner, a particularly playful pastor, wrote this: "Unless you become like a child," Jesus said, "you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." And maybe part of what that means is that in the long run, what's good about religion is playing the way a child plays at being grown up until he finds that being grown up is just another way of playing, and thereby starts to grow up himself. Maybe what is good about religion is playing that the kingdom will come until, in the joy of your playing, the hope and rhythm and comradeship and poignance and mystery of it, you start to see that the playing itself is the first fruits of the kingdom's coming and God's presence within us and among us. Now, just a quick note here. By necessity, if this represents the future kingdom, that means that all of the play we engage in, just as with all of the Sabbath activities we engage in, they must be ones that are restorative to the rest of creation, not harmful. If our play causes harm to our fellow creation, we do not honor the future reality of the kingdom where all things will be made new. The heart of this can be found in the next couple of verses in Matthew, where Jesus, still with the child in his midst, says, "If anyone causes these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." That is extreme language that Jesus uses, and I think Jesus is broadly speaking here about his heart for justice and for peace, especially on behalf of the vulnerable and the marginalized. But for our context, this tells us that any form of play or rest that comes at the harm of the vulnerable, including the rest of creation, is not rest or play, it is evil. Childlike play is recreational. That word, recreation, literally means to recreate. It is to make something new by our enjoyment of it. In fact, the whole idea of Sabbath, it could be argued, if you look at, if you do a biblical deep dive on Sabbath, it's often a lot more about our giving rest than our receiving rest. It's easy for us to think about it as just, how can I receive rest? But the stopping is to give rest to the land, to give rest to our families, to give rest to people around us. That's what it means to live into the kingdom. It's to be an ambassador of kingdom rest. And in so doing, we join in the story of creation. The story which is celebrated in the hymn that we're going to hit in just a second here, which says, "Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. It is this recreation, this recreation we participate in when we play.